Hello everyone, thanks for tuning into today's video. You're going to have a look at the weather next week to 10 days. In today's video, this will take us towards the end of April. And we've got some quite dramatic charts showing up at the moment. I did a blog about it last night. It looks like winds are going to be going into the north at the weekend and going through to next week. And this could be really quite a dramatic northerly that's on the way. For the time of year anyway, this looks like a very cold air mass that's coming down across the country at the weekend into next week. It will certainly bring a risk of further night frost, and I would be at all surprised actually if we don't get some wintry weather with this as well. And that's always going to be more likely in the north and over high ground, of course, but even down in the south, on the basis of the charts we're looking at right now, I wouldn't rule out the chance of some sleet or snow, even in the south on lower ground, at the end of the weekend and in around a week's time. So it is going to be a case of watching the forecast quite closely. If you've got anything invested in terms of your garden with tender plants, fruit blossom, or that kind of thing, it will be a case of watching the weather closely, I think, over the next few days to see whether the charts we're seeing right now do indeed verify whether there's a downgrade. I'm expecting a bit of a downgrade because what we're seeing at the moment is really quite dramatic for the time of year. Again, I have to keep emphasising that because we're not talking about widespread blizzards, probably, and severe cold temperatures as we would get in January with this sort of pattern. But for the time of year, it does look really quite impressively cold at weekend into next week. So I'll talk you through what's going on in a second. Before I get on with that, just very quickly to mention the ads. There's links to articles on all the pages. Have a browse through widgets and click through the links if there's any articles that you're interested in. Thanks so much for doing that. There's video ads on most of the pages which over the content when you watch them close back up again. And that's helping to pay for GavsWeatherVids.com. So thanks so much for getting involved. Thanks for doing that. Just starting off with central England temperature from Hadley. It's past the middle part of the month, of course, now. So we currently stand provisionally at 8.1, which is a little bit above average, actually. It's an anomaly of 0.8 degrees above average. I say that's provisional to the 17th. I think this is probably going to hold, excuse me, maybe even tick up a little bit around that level for the next couple of days, 2 or 3 days. But expect this to get a real kicking as we get through into the weekend and then on into next weekend. It certainly isn't impossible that we could end April 2016 colder than average. Of course, that would work out quite nicely for our month-ahead forecast. Right, let's have a look at the next 8 to 10 days with the 500 millibar height anomaly flow charts. We've got the ECMWF here on the top. The GFS is on the bottom, and we'll have a look at the GFS in a second. 500 millibars, 8,000 feet is an area in the atmosphere of high pressure, low pressure are being moved around by the jet stream running above. Red extrapolates to high pressure and blue extrapolates to low pressure. So these are the mean flow charts for the next 8 to 10 days time. It takes us to around the 28th of April, so more or less up to the end of the month. And you see that the ECM is placing a big ridge here around Greenland, and then we've got this very deep trough over and to the east of the UK. That's a proper blocked type pattern with cold air being entrenched into that trough of low pressure via the blocking. So the jet stream is doing something like this. It's going in that sort of fashion. And as I say, that's a really blocked and cold pattern. The blocking there over the pole is forcing out the cold air from the North Pole into the trough. And that's a deep trough as well, which will be bringing very unsettled conditions if it comes off. So within this cold air, there'll be bands of precipitation, rain, sleet, possibly snow, revolving around that trough of low pressure. If you want a cold winter pattern, that is the kind of thing you want to be looking for. You want to get the block to lock in over the North Pole and down into Greenland, set up a trough underneath it, and that's a locked-in cold pattern. It takes quite a while to shift out of that. That's the sort of thing that we saw in 2010 and again in March 2013. Haven't seen it for about 3 years, but here we go. We've got it, by the look of it anyway, if this verifies, we've got it for the end of April. GFS down on the bottom of the chart, very similar. So again, the trough is centred over the UK. The ridge, the block, is above it over Greenland. Doesn't quite stretch back to the top of the North Pole, as we see with the ECMWF, but even so, it's a big blocking ridge there set up over Greenland, and it's more or less the same idea. You've got the block over the pole and down into Greenland, the trough is underneath it around the UK and Western Europe. It's a locked in, cold, blocked pattern. Let's have a look at the GFS temperature precipitation ensembles for the next 2 weeks. So dealing with temperatures, first of all, the red line here is the 30-year temperature average. We're a little bit below average at the moment, been a fairly chilly couple of days. The temperatures forecast to tick up through the middle part of the week, turns quite warm for a time around Wednesday, but for around Thursday, Friday onwards, look at this, the trend is downwards with the temperatures, and then it looks like it's a fairly prolonged cold spell setting up there that takes us through to the end of the month. Remember, dates on the bottom of the chart. This is the 1st of May, just here. And even by then, we're still a little bit below average. But this final week of April does look really impressively cooler than average. Not only cooler than average, also turning more unsettled again. So the coming few days, up to around Thursday, lots and lots of dry weather, no real precipitation to speak of. After that, though, back come the precipitation spikes, quite a unsettled period turning up within this much colder period at the weekend into next week. So that just tells us that there will be precipitation within this cold air mass. And some of that could well be wintry, and particularly, of course, in the north, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, North Wales, over high ground will be the most favoured places, but don't rule out the chance of seeing a few flakes on lower ground, even down in the south. Almost certainly won't amount to too much, but you could see some flakes at the weekend and into next week. So this is the temperature anomaly for the coming week. This takes us from the 18th through the 26th of April, and you see we're colder than average here, not just for the UK, but virtually the whole of Europe, from the west, Ireland and Portugal in the west, over towards Russia in the east. It's generally colder than average. You have to go down to the Balkans and then Greece and Turkey to find warmer temperature anomalies, but most places having a pretty cold week for the coming week. The precipitation anomaly, that's looking drier than average, and of course this takes into account the next few days, which we know are going to be dry. Up to Thursday, going to be very dry across most parts of the country. Then the precipitation starts to come back from around Friday through to the weekend and into next week. So expect these to turn or to trend more unsettled over the next few days. But even then, I'm not sure it'll be a particularly wet period, of course, because generally when the air is colder, there's less energy in the atmosphere. Right, let's have a look at the generic charts. Here we go for Wednesday with the GFS model. We've got high pressure sitting over the top of the country. We go through to Thursday, high pressure still in control, but notice it's beginning to pull out in towards the Atlantic, to west of Scotland. By Friday, it's going into the Atlantic and moving up to Greenland. So from Wednesday to Friday, we take the high pressure from the UK over towards the middle part of the Atlantic and start to push it up towards Greenland. This is called retrogression. I talked about this quite a bit, and it basically means we're going against the zonal flow. The zonal flow is westerly. It's west to east because of the way we rotate around the sun. Our typical flow is always west to east, and that's generally the way the weather works. When you get retrogression, it means you're going against the zonal flow. So instead of west to east, you're going east to west. And when we get these locked-in cold patterns, when we get this significant blocking over Greenland, very often one of the first signs that it's taking place is that you will get retrogression, you'll go against the zonal flow. It just really tells you that the atmosphere is behaving in rather an unusual way. So we've got retrogression here through Wednesday into Thursday and Friday. Beyond that, we take the high pressure further north. There it goes on Saturday, down to push up towards the south of Greenland. This begins to open the door to northerly wind. Not particularly cold at this point, but there will be band of rain and maybe followed by wintry showers coming down across the country on Saturday. And by Sunday and into Monday, the high pressure block really is locking in then across Greenland and Iceland, and we're bring down really quite cold northerly winds. If you follow the isobars back, the air's originating from a long way north. There's a trough of low pressure running down the North Sea. So wintry conditions certainly for the north and the northeast, night frost and low daytime temperatures with a cold northerly wind. And things just get more extreme really as we go through into the middle part of next week. Look at all this blocking that we have by Wednesday. This is Wednesday, 27th of April. Really, really extensive blocking. If we'd got this in December or January, we would have had a very, very cold pattern setting up. It is, of course, moderated a lot because we're into the end of April. But essentially, it is still very extensive blocking that we've got here with these yellow colours over Greenland. There's the trough sitting underneath it, so it's a perfect representation of what I was just looking at on the height anomaly chart. The jet stream is doing something like that, so we're within the cold side of the jet, under that trough of low pressure. That looks really unsettled. There'd be quite a lot of rain rotating around that low pressure depression, and I'm sure wintry conditions too. We go through today 10, which is Thursday the 28th of April, and no general change. The trough is still there, centred around the UK. The block is still to the north, albeit perhaps weakening a little bit, but essentially is still a very unsettled and cold, locked-in block pattern. ECWF very similar. There's high pressure over the country on Wednesday. That retrogresses out into the Atlantic through to Friday, and Saturday starts to open the door to these chilly, at this point it is only chilly, north to northeasterly winds, but beyond that into Sunday and then into next week, that high pressure becomes more and more centred towards Greenland, opens the door to those northerly winds. And we just keep it cold then through next week with a lot of blocking around Greenland, a trough of low pressure underneath it. So again, it's identical really to the GFS with the jet stream again doing something like that. We're within the cold side of the jet. We're under a trough of low pressure. We've got the blocking, pushing cold air out of the Arctic into that trough. So again, that does look significantly cold for the time of year. Probably looking at temperatures into single figures across most parts of the country by day, probably around 9 or 10 in the south. Nighttime frost, most definitely, and also the risk of rain, sleet, or snow. Snow always most likely in the north, but possibly something coming further south. But I have a look at precipitation type forecast from the weatheroutlook.com, just showing that there is wintry potential with this. So we're starting on Friday as we bring this band of rain down across the country, introducing the first sort of push of cooler air on Saturday. Notice wintry showers coming into the north. Nothing too dramatic at this point. And then we go through into Sunday and we keep wintry showers in the north, the south, mostly dry. But Monday starts to drive those wintry showers further and further south. Remember, this is showers. It looks like a sort of a mass of snow pushing across the country on Monday in a week's time. It isn't quite as straightforward as that. It's a showery airstream, but it does show there is wintry potential, particularly for central and northern parts of the country. And then we're keeping it cold through into the middle part of next week, so this takes into Tuesday. We go on into Wednesday, and we've got further risk of rain, sleet or snow at times across the country through into the end of next week. So it looks quite interesting, to say the least, what's going on here. We're going to get a little burst of spring warmth actually from the middle part of the week. I'll make the most of it if that's what you want. I think a lot of people do want spring warmth in April. Make the most of it, because from Friday onwards we'll start to drag in a northeast wind. It won't be cold, that cold initially, just cooler. There's a lot of cloud and maybe some rain Friday, Saturday. From Sunday and then on into next week, it looks like we're going to open the door to a really cold northerly push. Really cold for the time of year, have to always be caveating that. A cold northerly push on Sunday and into next week. Very unsettled conditions as well, and certainly some wintry potential, particularly for the north, possibly a little bit in the south too. We'll have to firm up on that, obviously, over the next few days, and a very blocked pattern with extensive ridging across Greenland, Iceland, and the North Pole. Which is something we've not seen, as I said, since around March 2013. So it's been a long time coming, but here we go, it's setting in. That's it for now then, and thanks for watching.